Hello everyone and welcome back to the 3T Path channel. Welcome back to our Uddhava-gita course. Now we're in a very interesting section here where Krishna is talking about the necessity of bhakti, but now he's going to describe the ecstatic symptoms of bhakti, the emotions, the actual physical results of feeling those divine emotions. So it's a very interesting topic of mysticism and divine emotions. So, and of course, if you want to watch all the previous classes, make sure you become a member of this channel, and the instructions are here in the description of the video. And also check out Uddhava-gita.com, where you can see this whole Uddhava-gita course laid out. Okay, so we are in the 11th canto, 14th chapter, verse 22. So Krishna is still explaining to Uddhava that bhakti is absolutely necessary, and that without bhakti, nothing else, you won't achieve the end result. You'll have lots of wonderful benefits, but without bhakti, you won't complete the process, you won't unite with him. So Krishna says now, neither dharma endowed with honesty and mercy, nor knowledge obtained with great penance, can completely purify one's consciousness if they are bereft of loving service to me. So without bhakti to me. So he says here, not even dharma, not just any dharma, but dharma with satya and daya. Actually, satya and daya are, two of the principal legs of dharma anyway, but he's just emphasizing the importance of it. So, not even really nice dharma, well done dharma, nor vidya, knowledge with tapas. So not even tapas, knowledge, vidya, all these wonderful things that we have to develop anyway, which are, secondary important principles in spiritual life. Having tapas, having vidya, knowledge, dharma, satya, truthfulness, daya, compassion, all these very important things. They're wonderful, wonderful things, wonderful qualities. But these aren't enough without bhakti to me. Now, this is a difficult subject. It seems like sometimes it's obvious, but it requires some advancement for it to be obvious. What I've noticed in my, decades of teaching people is that when people are starting out, when they are not so advanced, but they're there, they're trying, but they're not so advanced yet in their spiritual progress, they tend to value and, which correctly, these things like dharma and satya and daya, all these wonderful abilities and qualities, saintly qualities. But they value this so much. It's almost like they get blinded by this and they can't see beyond it to the details of bhakti. They think, no, that's not even important at all. So like they think, it doesn't really matter if it's, Krishna or Jesus or something else. It doesn't, who cares? Because this is what's important. So they kind of only see that. And, God is like way behind there, kind of a nebulous thing. They can't see this importance of bhakti. Bhakti is specifically developing, and we're going to see here the emotions that Krishna's going to talk about. So very specific, intense bhakti can't be seen because, they're seeing these wonderful, you look at material nature, you look at ordinary life in this world, especially now in Kali Yuga, and it's horrible. People are horrible. People are mean, and they're lying, and they're cheating, and they're just nasty. They're horrible. So then, obviously, wow, somebody who's practicing, dharma is amazing. It's like, wow, it's brilliant. Truthfulness and compassion. these things they're just so bright in this darkness. It's understandable. It's like, okay, this is all there is, this bright light, it's, wow, it's wonderful, and this is it. But then they can't see that, once that's what I mean, once you're more advanced, It's kind of like your eyes get adjusted to the bright light of Dharma and Satya and Tapa. So like, it's still wonderful. But like now, you can see beyond these secondary things. You can see beyond them and like, oh, we have to develop an intense loving connection with Krishna. It's like, with Ram is different than with Krishna, and with Narayan is different from Ram. So you can see these more subtle details once you've accustomed to the light of a spiritual life, of the other spiritual qualities. And Krishna is saying, and then you can see how important it is to get that right, to get that connection right, the bhakti right, and to understand specifically, develop your rasa, your relationship specifically, with that form of Bhagavan. And then you can see how dramatic it is. Once you've gone over that, you can see how dramatic it is to understand the difference between impersonalism and personalism. The Advaita, the Shankara Advaita concept, and the concept being described here in Bhagavad-gita too, the concept of actually understanding the Lord's eternal form and His divine abode. And then that makes a huge difference. But when you're starting out, it's like, oh, who cares? Impersonal, it's this or that, who cares? Because it's like, this is what's important, is Dharma and Daya and Tapas. But it takes a little more advancement. So it's a very interesting concept. So here Krishna is talking about, look, these things, so they're wonderful, necessary, important things. It's like, then people try to like jump over these things and not practice. No, you can't jump over. You can't not be dharmic. You can't not practice tapas, not cultivate vidya, knowledge. You can't do that. But once you have done that for a sufficient amount of time, you have imbued these qualities in your life, then you can see, then you come to this point where this verse is where Krishna says, look, these things won't completely purify your consciousness if they're bereft of mad bhaktya, devotion unto me, Krishna says. See, those things are really nice, but it's not enough. They're necessary, but insufficient. So it takes a little more time in spiritual life to see the importance of the details, and then the details become actually super important. So it's actually, it's just a detail. Yeah, but the detail is super important, so you have to get it. It's nice to get it right in the beginning. When you're starting, it's really nice to, in the beginning, while you're working on your dharma and truthfulness and compassion and tapas, it's already really important to start with your bhakti to Krishna. Because that's going to help you get all those qualities, for one thing, Krishna says, because these qualities come from Him. And He says, you come to me and I'll help you. You take one step towards me, I'll take 10 steps towards you. So He is going to help you through that phase anyway. And then once you've situated yourself in that advanced mode of living, as a decent, wonderful person, then you'll see how important it is to understand. Look at the danger of this Advaita monistic concept. I don't want to merge into the Brahman. I want to have a loving relationship with Krishna in Goloka Vrindavan. It's like a huge thing now. Now it's a humongous thing. So it takes a little advancement. So here Krishna is saying about this purport. Although pious dharma, truthfulness, mercy, penances, and knowledge partially purify one's existence, they do not take out the root of material desires. Thus, the same desires will appear at a later time. After an extensive program of material gratification, one becomes eager to perform austerities, acquire knowledge, perform selfless work, and in general, purify one's existence. After sufficient piety and purification, however, one again becomes eager for material enjoyment. When clearing an agricultural field, one must uproot the unwanted plants, otherwise with the coming of rain, everything will grow back as it was. Pure devotional service to the Lord uproots one's material desires, so that there is no danger of relapsing into a degraded life of material gratification. In the eternal kingdom of God, loving reciprocation between the Lord and His devotees is manifest. One who has not come to this stage of enlightenment must remain on the material platform, which is always full of discrepancies and contradictions. Thus, everything is incomplete and imperfect without bhakti, without loving service to the Lord. Okay, verse 23. Now, the ecstatic symptoms of love to God. And these symptoms are very advanced. These symptoms are, they're spoken of in great saints, but we can have a little bit, just a little bit like right now, I'm experiencing a little bit of my hairs standing on end as I'm just reading this, at least a little bit we can have. So let's see what Krishna says here. Verse 23, if one's hairs do not stand on end, how can the heart melt? And if the heart does not melt, how can tears of love flow from the eyes? If one does not cry in spiritual happiness, how can one render loving service to the Lord? And without such service, how can the consciousness be purified? Really nice verse. This is a special verse. This is Krishna saying. It's a beautiful verse. So, hair standing on end. Just as I'm reading this, my hairs are actually standing on end. So, if hairs do not stand on end, how can the heart melt? And if the heart does not melt, how can tears of love not flow from the eyes? And if one does not cry in spiritual happiness, how can one render loving service to the Lord? And without this loving service, how can you purify your mind? Very beautiful, intense. This is the special quality of bhakti. This is the special intensity of bhakti, because it carries you with ras, with emotion. We, as living beings, we're not exclusively rational. We're not computers. We're not a computer. Computer, rational. This, that, put the program in, figures everything out. Boom, great. But we have reason and emotion. We have a brain and we have a heart, to use the poetic example. So we have these two things. We do have emotions. We are people. We have reason as well. We have intelligence. But we have emotions. Now, when you activate bhakti, when you work carefully in cultivating bhakti, and again, for that, you want to have the details. You want to know who it is you're loving. Sure, you can have, in Christian tradition, for example, there are, the stories of great saints with these symptoms of ecstatic love. You have that. So, of course, you can have that as a Christian, as a Muslim, as a Jew. Of course, this historically proven, registered to have these symptoms. But it makes it easier if you have a specific focus. So Krishna is very sweet, Radha Krishna, the wonderful love of Radha to Krishna. So just thinking about that love, just the love between Radha and Krishna, that love will make your love grow. So you can expand your love and then think of Krishna. And maybe if you're Vatsalya Ras and then you see, baby Krishna with the butter thief, that it just activates your emotion and it connects you. So then you use that rasa, use that emotion. It's just purifying your consciousness. It's just strongly and powerfully connecting you to God, the supreme purifier. And thus you make great advancement Great spiritual advancement is made so easily because you're using emotion. You're not using just a half of yourself, which is reason. You're using emotion. You want to use both. You want to use reason. That's why we have this beautiful, intricate, perfect philosophy. But then we have emotion as well. And then we have Krishna's Leelas. We develop rasa, we develop our emotions. We understand specifically, and we understand Vrindavan. You want to know what the kingdom of God is like. Goloka Vrindavan. You can feel that. You can feel Vrindavan. You can feel the bucolic beauty of Vrindavan, and grass fields and the hills and the Jamuna. You can connect with that. That already gives you emotions as well. That sets you up. And peacocks and cows, that just develops. So the more all these details of Leela, they really help. Of course, again, the great saints, Christian saints, they did it as well, they felt. But it's much easier in the Krishna Bhakti tradition, because we're in the Radha Krishna tradition, it's much easier to feel the emotions. That's what Chaitanya Mahaprabhu emphasized, left this legacy, and it's this connection, it's this love, it's so easy, so accessible. Everybody feels it, and then you can advance so much. So very important to work on this bhakti and to have these details to help you through your spiritual advancement and to connect you to the eternal leelas and to the eternal object of your spiritual growth. Purport. Loving service to the Lord is the only process that can completely purify one's consciousness. Such service produces waves of ecstatic love that completely cleanse the soul. Beautifully put. As mentioned earlier by Lord Krishna to Sri Uddhava, other processes such as self-control, pious activities, mystic yoga, penances, etc. certainly purify the mind, as stated in many authorized literature. Such processes, however, do not completely remove the desire to perform forbidden activities. But pure devotional service rendered in love of God, it is so powerful that it burns to ashes any obstacle encountered on the path of progress. That's what I'm trying to say. That the bhakti is just going to propel you through all the difficulties, through overcoming all the attachments and conditioning and selfishness and all the things that are keeping us in illusion away from God. Bhakti is just going to propel you forward. The Lord has stated in this chapter that loving service to Him is a blazing fire that burns to ashes all impediments. Krishna said you can see that in the last class, how bhakti burns to ashes all our sins, he said. In contrast, the small fires of mental speculation or mystic yoga can be extinguished by sinful desires at any moment. Thus, by hearing Srimad Bhagavatam, Bhagavad Purana, as you are now doing, one should ignite the blazing fire of loving service to the Lord and burn to ashes the network of material illusion. Very nice purport. Okay. Verse 24. A devotee whose speech is sometimes choked up, whose heart melts, who cries continually and sometimes laughs, who feels ashamed and cries out loudly and then dances. A devotee thus fixed in loving service to me purifies the entire universe. So these wonderful, intense feelings are so powerful that Krishna says these will purify others. He says purify the entire universe. It's so powerful because it's such a powerful connection you're establishing. Very wonderful. Purport. Vagadgada refers to the highly emotional state in which the throat is choked up and one cannot express oneself. Vilhaja indicates that a devotee sometimes feels embarrassment due to bodily functions and memories of past sinful activities. In this condition, the devotee loudly cries out the holy name of Krishna and sometimes dances in ecstasy. As stated here, such a devotee purifies the three worlds. By melting of the heart, one becomes very steady in spiritual life. Normally, one whose heart easily melts is thought to be unsteady. But because Lord Krishna is the stable foundation of all existence, one whose heart melts in love of Krishna becomes most stable and cannot be disturbed by opposing arguments, bodily suffering, mental problems, supernatural disasters, or the interference of envious persons. That's very nice, isn't it? That bhakti, and it does actually work. This bhakti gives you this solid fortress of your spiritual life where these things don't affect it, don't destroy it, don't overcome it. Envious people, other opinions, people who don't appreciate your spirituality, people who think you're doing it wrong or you're not focusing on money or something that you should be focusing on, which would make more sense to them, or just even suffering. When you're sick or dying, I've seen people, I've been right next to great devotees dying of stomach cancer, very painful cancer. I've seen them right there, and they're just in bliss, and they're completely devoted, and their bhakti is, their spiritual life is completely unaffected. If anything, it's actually strengthened by the suffering. Strengthened. They understand, like, oh, this is more important. This is the greatest thing. I remember very, again, hair standing on end, just thinking about it. His testimony of this lady devotee who said that her cancer, she was so grateful for having cancer. She was just so grateful because her cancer made her, she said all the spiritual knowledge just jumped up now. It was like so bright, like she would read something, it would just, all the jnana just came to life. She was feeling so much ecstasy just because everything was so clear. Her mind was so clear now, so spiritually. Her vision, her spiritual vision was so intense now because of the cancer. So she was very grateful. She was very happy that she had cancer. So it's like, wow, you hear that and you're like, wow, man, will I ever be at that level? It's like, whoa. So that's what it is. It's a fortress. It actually becomes it just strengthens your bhakti when it has opposition in the form of other people or suffering or situations. Because such a devotee is fixed in loving service to the Lord, he becomes the very heart of the personality of Godhead. Beautiful, very beautiful. Wow, what beautiful verses we've been blessed with today. Verse 25. Just as gold, when smelted in fire, gives up its impurities and returns to its pure brilliant state, similarly, the spirit soul absorbed in the fire of bhakti yoga is purified of all contamination caused by previous karma, fruitive activities, and returns to its original position of serving me in the spiritual world. So this is very interesting, right? Because of that, this comparison with gold, this is very interesting. It's funny as well because just yesterday I did a class in Portuguese and Kapila Muni said exactly the same thing, gave the exact same example. I know some of you watch both classes, some of you are English and Portuguese speaking, but if you watched yesterday's class, we had the same thing about gold. So it's gold, smelted in fire to remove its purities. It was the same thing was used yesterday. So gold smelted by fire gives up its purities, returns to its brilliant state. So we use this example of gold, the intensity of the fire of bhakti yoga. So you use this, tapas also means heat. So you get this a lot in spiritual life. Tapa means heat, and here the fire of bhakti yoga. So this, this metaphor, the fire to burn up, to remove the impurities is used a lot. Now, so all the impurities are removed. What impurities are these? These are the impurities of our past karma. The word here in Sanskrit is karma. We've been doing karma life after life, and so we're all dirty, we're all contaminated. So they use these words, contaminated, dirty, so we have to remove this selfishness and the evil deeds and the lying and all the bad stuff that we do in karma, in a selfish, ignorant life. So all these things, get purified by this fire, by the intensity of the emotions of bhakti, of rasa. These things purify the mind, and thus returns you to the state of Mat Bhakti Yoga. Again, Krishna said so many times, he's been saying Mat Bhakti Yoga to me. Every time he's saying Bhakti Yoga to me, because this is the advantage of taking instruction directly from Krishna, because Krishna is always saying to me, Bhakti Yoga to me. So it's very clear where that Bhakti should go. So Krishna is saying that Bhakti Yoga to me. So he returns that, you return to that state of consciousness, which is your natural state of consciousness. Very good. Purport. According to Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, this verse indicates that the devotee goes back home, back to Godhead, where there worships Lord Krishna in his original spiritual body, your Swarupa, which is compared to the original pure form of smelted gold. So this is one of those verses that is understood as an indication that we were in the spiritual world, we fell into the material world, and now Krishna is saying, you come back to me. So this coming back home, as Prabhupada would say, back home, back to Godhead. So we go back to Krishna. Of course, Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur is a spiritual master in a lineage from many centuries ago, from the 1700s. But so he's saying that too. He had this idea that this verse was indicating this return to your original state. Gold alloyed with inferior metals cannot be purified by water and soap. Similarly, the heart's impurities cannot be removed by superficial processes. Only the fire of love of God can cleanse one's soul and send one back home, back to Godhead, to engage in eternal loving service to the Lord. Wow, so beautiful. So I think we're just going to stop here, because this is just way too much nectar for anyone to process. And I hope you have the rest of your day with lots of peace and lots of love.